Well, hello, amazing parents, and welcome back to our series entitled Fearless First Parents. In this video, I want to talk about the one thing every child craves. So, every child comes into the world with two questions: who am I? And do I have value? And every child craves to know that they have value, that you accept them for who they are, and that you approve of them. And I call this need for parental approval the rocket fuel to parenting. It is the secret to successful parenting. I would say in my raising of my children that the one thing that I got right was that something the Lord had just intuitively given me. I started having children right after, I wasn't even grown myself. I was 19 years old when I had my first child. And so I was fresh out of my own childhood. And the only thing I knew about parenting was that I wanted my children to grow up in an environment where they felt important, safe, and loved. And that was it. I just intuitively wanted to express that to my kids. And so I did really well at that. All the other things I'm teaching you, I didn't learn these things till much later in life. But because I understood that the importance of approval, it affected the way I engaged my children's cooperation or obedience, whatever you want to call it. It affected the way I interacted with my children. I wasn't a perfect parent, but I'm telling you that this one thing is so important that if you just get this right, it'll make a huge difference for your own children. In fact, it was the difference maker for my kids. You see, I grew up in a home that was very performance oriented, and I performed very well in school and academics and music, and I did some sports as well. I wasn't great at sports, but I did very well at music and academics, and yet my parents did not understand the importance of approval. And so instead of approval in the form of, you did a good job, that was great, they were always telling me how I could do better. Now, it wasn't because they didn't think I did well, but they didn't express that to me. It's almost like we think our children already know how good they are, that they have value, and they don't. They need us to tell them. They need us to say, wow, that's a great job building that block tower. Wow, that's an amazing sandcastle. Wow, you ate your lunch. It's just praising them for everything they do is really very simple when they're little. When they're newborns, they're not doing anything yet that tries our patience. And so just praising them for being who they are is what we want to focus on. So I just want to share a little bit more about my story because it truly exemplifies the importance of parental approval. So I grew up in this environment where I just never felt good enough. And like I said, my parents didn't mean to communicate that to me. They were trying to encourage me to do even more because they knew I could, but I didn't know I could. Every time they told me I could do better, I felt like, oh, I haven't done good enough. And so that's what happens when you're always telling your child to do better. They always have that feeling of, I'm not quite good enough. I need to do a little better. And so all through school, I did my best. I tried my best at everything put in front of me. I graduated second in my class from a private school, very competitive, a lot of smart kids. And yet I felt like I was a state level musician, and it was a small state. But anyway, I felt like a complete and utter failure. I didn't even want to go to my high school graduation because I felt so ashamed. I thought I could have done better. Maybe in the back of my mind, I thought I could have been number one. I actually thought I really didn't try very hard because academics was easy for me, and I took easy classes just because I didn't care. I was looking for love, not grades, right? And so, and that's the thing about approval. You can love your child, but if they don't feel your approval, they don't feel loved. And one counselor put it this way, that your child can feel loved, but they need to know they're approved of. And I think approval is the best way to communicate your love, because what is love? It's accepting a person for who they are. And so anyway, I grew up in this very performance-oriented family, a lot of high achievers, a lot of siblings and a lot of competition, not overt, but there was just a standard set. I had a lot of older siblings, and a father that was very performance driven. And he was also a college level teacher, and so he was a very, very hard grader, I understood, and never gave an A. He never gave an A because he felt like that meant you'd achieved the highest rank and that you could never do better. And I feel sorry for anyone who had my dad for a class. I apologize on his behalf. But yeah, no one ever got an A in his class because he felt like that left no room for improvement. And so that's the atmosphere I was raised in. And my dad was a great guy. He's very loving and generous and all that. But like I said, my parents didn't understand some basic human psychology, and it really messed with me. And I really did truly felt like an utter failure when I got to my high school graduation. Didn't want to go to the ceremonies because I was just ashamed. I was like, what did I do? Not really anything. I could do a lot more. And I could do a lot more. I took easy classes because I didn't care. Anyway, so so after high school, I got married and started having children right away. Like I said, I had my first daughter when I was 19. And I just had the opposite, maybe because I was fresh out of my own childhood and I knew I didn't want my children to feel the way I did, that I had the complete opposite perspective on my kids. I thought everything they did was amazing. They colored a picture. They scribbled on a page. Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. And I really felt that way. They took their first step and I just thought, oh my gosh, it's a miracle, And so I just marveled at everything they did, and they just did more and more, and I just kept praising them and affirming them, and they just all did very well. In fact, I felt like one by one I watched my kids pass me up in life, and as they got older, they seemed to have this stability about them and this understanding of this game called life, and they were all very stable and successful. And the way my adult life ended up was I was married and divorced 3 times. That created so much chaos in my life. I was always moving. Nothing was stable. Complete upheaval. So my childhood on the outside looked very stable. My parents stayed married for life. I lived in the same house my entire childhood. Went to private school, had private music lessons. It looked like my parents had given me everything I needed to be successful in life. Flip it to my kids, and it was the opposite. On the outside, our life looked like chaos. One of my sons was identified for a high-risk program in middle school because he was a high achiever in school, but because of the family dynamics, they didn't think he would go to college, and so he was identified for this special program. On the outside, our life looked very unstable, but my kids, as they grew up, were very stable adults, and they had stable families of their own, and stable marriages, and careers, and buying houses, and just things I'd never done in my life they were doing. And I thought to myself, what do they know that I don't know? And it really wasn't what do they know, it was what did they get that I didn't get. You see, my parents had given me all these things on the outside that they thought would give me a successful life. And God bless them for that. I'm thankful that they did. They did the best they knew how. But they didn't give me the one thing that every child needs. And that's that feeling of acceptance and approval that says you are good enough and we love you just the way you are. Even if I would have got straight D's instead of straight A's, just to be loved and accepted for that, not because of what you do, but because of who you are. I mean, that's the way God accepts us, because we are his child, not because of our performance. We don't have to perform for God. We don't have to be good enough. We don't have to try to measure up. He's already made us acceptable. So he accepts us because we're his child. I remember when my youngest son was born, and we didn't know when I was pregnant that he had a disability. And so when he was born, it was a bit of a shock. And yet, my mom, who was there at the birth, she said, you all just loved him just as if he was perfectly normal. And I said, well, we don't love our kids because of anything they do. We just love them because they're ours, right? And so that's what we want to convey to our kids, is that their acceptance and their approval isn't based on their performance or anything they do. It's based on who they are. And so we talked about establishing that spiritual identity in them, when they're little, in their heart. And that's what we approve of, who they are, who God made them to be, who they are on the inside, not anything they do. Because the reality is, if they feel that we approve of them, they will flourish beyond anything you could imagine, you could force on them or try to, make them do. So oh, my battery is running low. I need to plug in here. I'm going to lose my notes. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. I should have seen that coming. All righty, there we go. Thank you for waiting. So in their book called The Blessing, John Trent and Gary Chapman, who wrote many books on parenting, a really good book. Some of their books were some of the ones that influenced me a lot when I was a young parent. But in their book called The Blessing, it says, a blessing always begins in the context of parental acceptance. And so, and then they also said, anytime we bless someone, we are attaching high value to them. So a blessing is an expression of acceptance and value. And that's what parental approval is. It's your blessing, your stamp of approval on your child, that you accept them for their inherent value. Because our value, like I said, is not based on anything we do, or it shouldn't be. It's based on who we are. We're made in God's image. We are a unique and a special individual God created for a unique purpose that only we can fulfill. It's like each of us is a piece of God's heart sent to earth to bring that piece of his heart to the world. And so we're all very special. In fact, the Father, our Heavenly Father, modeled this type of acceptance and approval for us in the scriptures. When Jesus came to be baptized, he said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased." Well, Jesus hadn't taught one sermon, healed one sick person, or done one miracle, and yet the Father was saying he was well pleased with him. Not because of anything he did, it was just because he was his Son. So that's the type of approval that we want to send to our children, because the reality is, your child will always crave that. It's the one thing they come into the world craving. And if they don't get it from you, they're going to go looking for it in all the wrong places. And it happens all the time. That's why kids join gangs and become promiscuous and do drugs. They're looking for a place or group of people or a reason for others to accept them and approve of them. And so if they don't get it from you, they'll go looking for it somewhere else. And they don't even know they're doing that. It's not a conscious thing. It's just that innate desire. I need to know that I have value. We all need to know that. And so as parents, we need to be the ones to give that to our children. And when you give your children that approval and they grow up feeling like they're valued and accepted just for who they are, not for anything they do, then you don't have to tell them not to do drugs, not to sleep around, not to, run with the gang. You don't have to, because here's the thing is, when you feel you are valued and your parents place high value on you, then what you value, you naturally protect it. If I have a piece of jewelry that's got a high value to it, I'm going to protect that, right? And so when you know that you have value, you're not going to devalue yourself or lower yourself to those things that are just, they're not at the level of the value that you see in yourself. So you're protecting your child against all that stuff without ever having to say a word about it. It's just a natural thing. It's one of those kingdom keys. So attaching high value and importance is what they said a blessing was. And in our world today, we don't say, "Oh, I bless you with this and I bless you with that." And in fact, in the Bible, blessings don't always say, "I bless you." In fact, when Jacob blessed his 12 sons right before he died, he didn't say, "I bless you." He just expressed the value that he saw in each one of them. And that's all it is when you're blessing your child, you're approving of your child. And that blessing is kind of equivalent with that stamp of approval. So what does it look like to place high value or show acceptance to your child? Well, when you have a baby, a newborn baby, a little one, just talking to them and telling them loving things, that they bring you so much joy, that you're so thankful for them, that they're precious and special, that God made them for great things. Some of the things we said in the other, but just, as they get older, just spending that time with them, interacting, showing that they have value. Because if you spend time with somebody, you obviously value them, right? Asking them for help, even when they're a year old. Can you throw this in the trash for me? Or can you go get that for me? It makes someone feel very valuable when they feel they have use, right? Like, oh, I can do something for my mom. That makes me feel important and valued, right? Thanking them just for whatever, or just for being there, just for smiling. Oh, smiling at them. That shows huge approval, just by smiling at someone. Have you ever been walking down the street and you just catch someone's eye and just smile, and they kind of just go, oh, and they kind of smile back? Because sadly, we don't do that enough. But and then also giving them responsibilities, age appropriate responsibilities as they get older, giving them things they can do. I remember asking a 2-year-old, can you go get a diaper for me to change the baby, and they'll run and get a diaper. They love doing that stuff. And it makes them feel so important and valuable to be able to contribute to the family. So here's the reality and the summary of parental approval. And this is a quick summary, but every child works either for approval or from approval. My whole childhood, I worked for approval. I didn't know I was doing that, but I got to my high school graduation, I felt worthless because I'd never felt approved of. And so you're always working, and then after a while, you just give up. I was like, I'm not going to go to college. I've been jumping through all the hoops all my life, and I still don't feel good enough. Why would I want more of a beating, right? More to tell me I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. Because that was kind of the script that had, the enemy takes things. And my parents never told me I wasn't good enough. They never told me I had to do better. It wasn't anything like that. It was just very subtle. And I'm sure I know they were very proud of me, but it was just not communicated effectively. So I was always working for approval. And what that causes a child to be is they're fearful, they're timid, they don't want to take risks because they're afraid of failing. Well, if I fail, I'm going to get more disapproval, and what I want is approval, so I'll play it safe. And they never reach their full potential because of that. On the other hand, a child who works from approval, who knows that his parents' approval of him is not dependent on his performance, it's based on who he is, then he's fearless, because he knows that even if he fails, he still has his parents' approval. And that's the one thing every child craves. And if he knows he can't lose it, well, he'll try anything. And so he'll take risks, he'll be a high achiever, and he'll become, that's what my kids did. They far excelled anything I ever did. And it was just because they felt like they could, and that they would be encouraged in it and not judged. So you can't wait for your child to deserve approval before you give it to them. Another example from the scriptures, like Jesus, God approved of, Father approved of him before he did anything. But here's an even better example for us, because we could say, well, Jesus was perfect, right? But scripture tells us that it was while we were yet sinners that Christ died for us. So Father put his stamp of approval on us and said, you're good enough for me. I'll pay the highest price to have you. That's how much I approve of you. And so he died for us while we were yet sinners. He didn't wait till we deserved it. He didn't even wait till we accepted it or received it. So we can express approval in a lot of ways, proactively or even reactively. And when we do, we're placing high value and showing our children we accept them for who they are, regardless of their behavior. Even when they're behaving unacceptably, I talk more about that in some of my other courses. You can still approve of who they are without approving of their unacceptable behavior, because who they are is always good. They're made in God's image. They have a destiny and purpose. They're unique. They're loved by God. All of these things, he paid a high price for them. and so their value is innate. It's there because of who they are, who God made them to be, and what He's done for them. So when you do this, when you express approval, you're building their self-esteem and confidence. You're communicating love better than any other way. I mean, you could do all sorts of things for your kids and give them all sorts of things, but if they don't feel the approval, all those other things are empty and meaningless. And like I said, if they don't get it from you, they'll go looking for it in all the wrong places if they don't get that approval and acceptance, because everyone needs to be accepted for who they are. So that's kind of a summary of giving your child approval. It's just kind of an attitude. It's an attitude of looking at your child as good enough and just valuing him or her the way God does, and seeing them from the inside out who they really are. And as you begin to define their true identity, it will help you to see them that way, which will make it more natural just for you to easily send messages of approval to your child. So you can even correct your child without disapproving of him. And that's another thing that you will learn in my 3 Simple Steps to Instant Toddler Obedience. So I hope this has been helpful to you. Thank you so much for joining me for this course. Just congratulations on your new baby if you have one, or maybe you're just watching this because you have a young one. I just hope it's been helpful to you. You can check out my other courses on my courses list, and join the Facebook group if you haven't done that. God's Blueprint for Raising World Changers Facebook group. And there we have, you'll be able to meet other parents who are on the same journey, and also to hear input from myself and some free group coaching, live coaching calls that happen inside that group. So God bless you and take care. And until the next time.